Good morning, everyone. Welcome to All Souls Unitarian Church's virtual service for June the 14th. My name is Greg Sanders, and I'm very proud to be your music director here at All Souls, but I'm also acting as our technical director during the COVID times. I hope you all had a lovely week and enjoyed the gorgeous weather we've had the last couple days. And we're so excited to have you all here this morning. Just a couple of words about what you might want to look out for and expect in a virtual service if you're joining us for the first time. Many of you are now old hats at all this Zoom stuff, so I think you're pretty comfortable, but keep in mind that you'll want to keep yourself muted throughout the service. It works better audio-wise if you're all muted for that time. You also can choose a couple of different views from your options. You can choose a gallery view or a speaker view. Typically, the speaker view works better for the presentation of this service. Also, we have prepared a slide deck to go along with our services today, and so you'll want to pay attention to those. They oftentimes have important information. At the end of the service, we'll ask you to join our virtual coffee hour and get a chance to say hello to your friends and fellow congregants. Also know that we're doing this service on Facebook Live. If you want to check it out that way, you can also see that and also catch that then later on once our communications folks get it up to see in an archival format. Today we're welcoming a guest minister from Bloomington, Indiana, Mr. Forrest Gilmore, and he has some opening words for us. We're going to get started with our service today. Thank you for joining us, and please help me to welcome Forrest to our service today.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be with you. These opening words this morning come from David Pohl. We come to this time and this place to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, and to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair with all her people one.
John.
I'll start over. Sorry about that. You think by now that all of us would know how to use Zoom. I apologize, friends. I am John Murphy, the worship associate for today, and I welcome each of you who have joined us in this virtual worship service of All Souls Unitarian Church. It is my sincere hope that gathering today in worship will help maintain some sense of balance in our lives, at least for the short time we are together in spirit. All Souls is an inclusive congregation where we continually renew our promise to try to live the elements of our covenant. In spite of our current need to protect each other by avoiding physical contact, we remain steadfast that our purpose is to put love into action. We intend to spark positive change within ourselves and in our communities in whatever ways we can. We continue to embrace a hope that we can help move the arc of the universe toward justice. If you have joined us because you're searching for community, we are so happy to have you with us. If you have questions about All Souls Church or Unitarian Universalism, please browse our website, www.allsoulsindy.org. There you will find information about us and contact information for any of our capable staff. Today, more than ever, we need to connect with each other and cultivate community. Later in the service, we will display a link to an online connection card that provides a means for you to let us know of changes or concerns in your life, and a way for you to let us know of your interest in one or more of the upcoming opportunities for virtual interaction. If you are visiting our Zoom service for for the first time and want to develop a closer connection to the All Souls community, you can use the connection card to provide us with your contact information. And now, I invite us to enter into a time of worship. Today, the Hamilton family will light our chalice. And now, I will recite the covenant, and Aidan will say it also. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. Thank you.
Please join us in singing our opening hymn. It's When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. The lyrics are there for you on the slide.
A couple of days ago, we needed to drive up to Indy to run a couple of errands. As I was getting up to speed on Highway 37, which has a speed limit of 60 miles per hour, I set the cruise control about 65 to 67. That ordinarily puts me at the speed of most of the traffic. However, I began to notice that I seemed to be creeping up behind what looked to me to be a local Martinsville police vehicle, outfitted with all sorts of radar and equipment and emergency lights. I eased my speed down near 60 miles per hour and hoped he wasn't having a bad day or wasn't needing to make quota. I suspected he might even have deliberately been going that slow in order to catch some unsuspecting speeder from Bloomington. As it turned out, nothing happened as he turned off at Henderson Ford Road, and I continued on my way, a bit relieved. At this point, I did something I had never done before. Prompted by the past days of visceral protests against police misconduct, I thoughtfully tried to imagine what I might have been feeling and thinking had I been a black man in the same exact situation. I reasoned how unfair it would have been for the officer to pull me over for going at a speed consistent with the traffic. But I would need to hold my tongue at all costs. I imagined the fear, seeing the officer coming up in the side view mirror with his gun drawn, and tried to imagine the terror that my life might be at stake if I inadvertently made the wrong move. I did reason that my two little granddaughters strapped in their car seats in the back with their imaginary black faces would show that I was not up to no good. But then I recalled that the presence of a young child had not prevented tragedy in at least one similar scenario in the recent past. At this point, my white privilege thinking took over, and I didn't pursue this imaginary scenario any further. I knew I really couldn't internalize the deep fear that my black brothers and sisters experience in their lives, when their lives may be on the line in ordinary, everyday situations such as this. The widespread protests around the world will produce some badly needed and long overdue changes in our laws and policies. Hopefully, the proposals for positive change will survive the eventual decline of the visible protests. However, the only thing that will ultimately bring about permanent change is change in the minds and hearts of people like you and me. I say this because I believe that vestiges of inherent racism are permanently imprinted deep down in our lizard brains, and that rational and that objective thinking are the only way to overcome it. It is extremely hard. But we as Unitarian Universalists pledge to ourselves and each other that we will do our damnedest to try. Knowing full well that we white people can never fully understand the ways that white privilege and white supremacy are interwoven into the fabric of our society, we nonetheless pledge to listen with open hearts to those who are trying to help us see the truth. One small step I could take is whenever I see a police vehicle possibly observing me commit a relatively minor traffic offense, I take a pause and note that although the worst I can expect is a warning or a small fine, I remember that Black lives have been lost in similar situations. And I resolve to use other seemingly ordinary circumstances for me to remind me of the dangers and threats these same situations represent for my Black fellow human beings.
Thank you so much for that, John. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Cannon, and I am your Director of Children's and Community Programming here at All Souls. And I am so excited to have a guest minister here today. I love guest ministers. You want to hear something funny? My first Unitarian congregation wasn't a church. It was a fellowship. Fellowships are a little different from churches. They don't usually have a minister who's there all the time, like Reverend Anastasia has been here. The congregation finds guest speakers and they run the worship themselves every weekend. This summer is going to be a little bit like that for us until our interim minister, Reverend Joel Miller, arrives in August. This feels familiar to me, and it also makes me feel very proud because our worship team is working so hard to find guest speakers and to plan worships for us. So if you see any of our worship associates, I suggest you say thank you during coffee hour. But today, I want to focus on something else. You see, Reverend Gilmore is going to tell us about some tough issues involving racism that have been going on in Bloomington over the past year. You might know this already, but Bloomington is where Indiana University is. Some of our congregants went to college there. In fact, some of our young adults go there now. Reverend Gilmore is going to tell us some of the ways whole groups of people have been working together to make things better in Bloomington, even when it's difficult. And that's really important stuff for us to know. Hopefully we'll get some good ideas that will feed our spirits and help us learn new ways to organize well when there's a problem in our communities. But let's talk for 1 minute about when you're on your own and you hear someone say something harmful, something stereotypical, something untrue about a person or a whole group of people. Who knows this guy? Put it in the chat. Who could it be? So for those who don't know, this is Neville Longbottom. And if you're a Harry Potter fan, you know that one night, Harry and Ron and Hermione were sneaking out after bedtime, and Neville caught them. And he didn't want everyone in Gryffindor to get into trouble, so while he was very sorry to have to do it, he did try to raise the alarm. Now, this didn't work, of course. Hermione charmed him. Anyone know what that spell was? Petrificus totalis, right. But afterwards, even though Neville didn't succeed, Dumbledore praised him for being very brave. He said, "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends." And I think that's really important because sometimes our friends get it wrong. Heck, sometimes the author of the Harry Potter books, J.K. Rowling, gets it wrong. She got it wrong just this week, and people who grew up loving her books or acting in the movies had to tell her so. And that's hard to do. In fact, sometimes when somebody says something that's a problem, something that's unfair to Black and brown people, or to LGBTQIA people, or to people with a disability, we feel like someone just zapped us with Petrificus totalis. We don't know what to say or do. But you know what? We do need to respond. We need to move up, especially if what got said was about somebody else, not us. Why? Well, for starters, the people who are most affected by these kinds of hurtful words hear them a lot. And the only thing that hurts worse than hearing one more hurtful comment is sitting in a room full of people who don't speak up when it happens. Think about how lonely that would be, to sit there knowing that not one person said, "That's not okay," even though they knew you heard the whole thing. You might even think they all agreed with what was said. Another really important reason to say something is because hurtful language spreads like COVID-19. You know how important it is to practice social distancing and wear your mask when you go out, right? That's something we do to be a community of care, to protect not just ourselves, but the people around us. So when we hear something that we know is wrong from talking to our families, our friends, and our congregation here at All Souls, saying something is how we protect our wider community. So What should we do when we hear false and harmful statements? We should say, that's not okay, or that's hurtful. We should explain why. If we see, though, that explaining is going to be a problem because maybe the person is not ready to listen or we're having trouble finding the right words, then we can ask a friend who understands the work we're trying to do to come and sit with us. Or we can ask an adult we trust to help. That's especially true if the person who said the harmful thing was an adult, and that does happen sometimes. Speaking up when you hear harmful words can be uncomfortable. But you know what? It's so much harder to be the person the harmful words were about. So we need to be brave like Neville, live our principles, and use our voices. Thank you.
Many of you know our my friend and colleague, Angela Brown. Angela is a fabulous soprano here in Indianapolis. She's Black. She has sung a lot of major roles across the country, and she recently has been doing some really exciting recording, and she's been putting it online. And so today for our Celebrate with Music, we're going to enjoy a recent performance that she and another of my colleagues, Paulo Castro, put up online of the song, Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. I'm going to share this with you momentarily. Enjoy this lovely performance.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Alone from home, a long way from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. A long way from home. A long way from my home. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes
Good morning, All Souls. My name is Nasreen Khan. I am the Communications and Programming Coordinator, and I am doing your joys and concerns this morning. I wanted to lift up the Bump family, who are long-term members of the community. Joy Bump has unfortunately passed away. And our hearts go out to the family as they plan the memorial during this time of COVID-19. We also want to lift up Nancy Renner Clear, who has moved to Cincinnati. She's doing very well, and she would really appreciate some contact. And those details are in our Hearts, Thoughts, and Prayers section of the order of service. Additionally, Mary Branson, who is also listed in the order of service, is another member who would really appreciate some contact. She has just had a birthday a few weeks ago, and she would really welcome a phone visit. Thank you so much for being in community with me this morning.
I invite us together to take a moment in prayer with each other. Holy and loving mystery within us, around us, and beyond us. Spirit of life and love, joy and strength within. Let us take a moment just to rest on the forming edge of our lives, to sit where we are placed, to be present to the feel of the chair or the couch or space that we're resting upon. To listen to the noises around us, might be a car driving by outside, to birds chirping, to the sound of the air conditioning, to the breath of someone nearby. May these simple acts of engagement and presence and connection, may they hold us and just nourish us and strengthen us, recognizing we are not ever alone. May we open our hearts in gratitude this morning to all the things that bring us joy. May we cherish and honor and remember how important life is to us, that we have the gift of breath, that we have the gifts of community, that we have the gifts of each other. Gifts of family, friends, kindnesses, unexpected. Cats and dogs, birds, pets that bring us life and love and joy. May we also open our hearts to those near and far who are in need, to those whose names were just called forth, including the Bump family. May we also remember the many people still struggling with the challenge of coronavirus and the issue and its impact on our world. Almost 8 million people infected worldwide, and more than 400,000 who've lost their lives. May we too hold in our hearts the great challenge of racism in our country and our nation. Remembering names like Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and an American man who just lost his life just last night, Rayshard Brooks, and so many more. May we say their names, may we remember them, and may we fight for a nation that is more fair and more just than it is today. For all of this and so much more, may we continue to dedicate our hands and our hearts, our minds and our means to making our world a place of love and justice. Shalom, amen, and blessed be. And let us now be in silence together. Thank you and amen. And I invite us now to join together in song number 95, There Is More Love Somewhere. The words are on your screen.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more somewhere. There is more somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace
So it's good to be with you again. It's been a long time. So this is a unique way to be with you, but I'm happy to be with you in whatever form we can be together today. That was just a beautiful song, and I'm grateful to be ushered into this sermon with that gorgeous song. For those of you who don't know me or don't remember me, I was with you almost a decade ago during a sabbatical for your minister at the time, Bruce. And during his sabbatical, I spent some time with you, and it's really great to be with you. I'm the community minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Bloomington, and also the executive director of the Shalom Community Center, which is a homeless resource center in Bloomington, and homeless hunger and poverty resource center for folks. So Again, it's really good to be with you all. The sermon today is based on some personal experiences and deals with the issue of humor. And just want to offer a caveat in that dealing with racism is an incredibly serious issue and a challenging issue. And I just want to be very careful with walking that line that when talking about humor in the act of addressing and being anti-racist, it's not in any way meant to convey any kind of lack of seriousness in addressing a really challenging issue. I want to start with words from Mark Twain from the Chronicle of Young Satan in the Mysterious Stranger manuscripts. And Mark Twain tells us, humanity has unquestionably one really effective weapon: laughter. Power, money, persuasion, supplication, persecution, these can lift at a colossal humbug, push it a little, crowd it a little, weaken it a little, century by century. But only laughter can blow it to rags and atoms at a blast. Against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand. So in 2007 in Knoxville, Tennessee, there was a neo-Nazi rally that was preparing to march, and a counter-protest was organized to this neo-Nazi rally. But instead of anger and rage, these neo-Nazis were met with something very different. They were met with a large troop of clowns. As the neo-Nazis shouted "white power," these clowns pretended not to understand and shouted back, "White flour?" And they threw fistfuls of white flour into the air. The Nazis shouting "white power" again, the clowns responded, "tight shower," and they held up a shower head and crowded ridiculously close together. Again and again, the counter-protesters mocked the calls to white power with misunderstanding. "Wife power?" And they raised letters up high, spelling out the words, put on wedding dresses, and the female clowns lifted the male clowns into the air, carrying them around. "White flowers?" And they handed white flowers out to everyone, including some of the neo-Nazis. The clowns, calling themselves the Ku Klux Clowns, stole the show that day as the police walked cheerfully alongside them and the neo-Nazis canceled their rally hours early. The German town of Wunsiedel struggled to deal with annual neo-Nazi marches through their community. Ordinary counter-protests failed, so they tried a different tack. They painted on the street start and finish lines, and they hung funny signs along the route of this march, and they threw confetti at the end. The town sponsored 10 euros for every meter the neo-Nazis walked and donated the equivalent of 10,000 American dollars to an organization that helped people leave hate groups. In Columbia, South Carolina, a tuba player followed along a rally to honor the Confederate flag, playing silly songs and Ride of the Valkyries, the famous piece from the notoriously anti-Semitic Richard Wagner. In Portland, Oregon, during a recent Proud Boys march, a marching band dressed up as bananas, calling themselves the Banana Block. Also, a video made the rounds of two people in giant inflatable unicorn costumes with rainbow manes engaging with right-wingers at that very same Proud Boys rally last year. You know, racism, of course, is very much drawing our national attention. It should, and the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd set off national protests against violence directed at Black and brown people, especially police violence. Countless essential and important issues are being raised right now about systemic racism and the function of police and white privilege and the use of power, arrogance, and even a pretend vulnerability, as in the Central Park birdwatching incident, to do racial harm. If you haven't yet read Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, I greatly encourage you. It's an astounding book that that I highly recommend. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. It's just really, really fantastic. And today I want to offer you a perspective on one form of racism that is terrifyingly on the rise, and it's that of white supremacy and right-wing extremism. I think it's important to know that in 2018, and we're still getting numbers for 2019, they haven't been released yet, but in 2018, every single act of extremist violence in the United States was linked to right-wing extremism, every single one. And over the last decade, nearly 75% of extremist-related killings have been linked to domestic right-wing extremism. Violent hate crimes are on the rise, hitting their highest number ever in 2018. We're also seeing public expressions of right-wing extremism growing with the manifestation of the alt-right, the extremist infiltration of the college lecture circuit, the Proud Boys rallies in the Pacific Northwest, and the pro-Confederate rallies often in the South. And more recently, we've seen international involvement of right-wing extremists in the nationwide protests as they've attempted to stoke violence and property destruction, hoping to invoke something they call the Boogaloo, which is a complete breakdown of society and a resulting race war. As an example, a recent Twitter account tied to a group we'll talk about a bit later, Identity Europa, pretended actually to be a group of, pretended to be an Antifa group, and called for rioting to move out of the city and into white neighborhoods. To understand this particular brand of racist hostility and violence, and even more importantly, how to combat it, I think it's really important that we have to get into the psychology a bit of white supremacists and the reasons behind their extremism. And it starts, I think, with the experience of threat. The El Paso attacker from last summer, if you've, some of you, I hope, remember that horrible incident, but in a manifesto that he left behind, he described the growing number of Latinos in Texas as an invasion that threatened the power of white Americans. That's actually how he described it. And other recent extremist attackers have expressed similar fears of being under attack from immigrants and people of color, Muslims, Jewish people, and other minority groups. Commonly espoused in white supremacist circles, the Great Replacement theory posits a plot masterminded by Jews to replace whites with other races. This was narratively so well represented by the torch-bearing marchers of Charlottesville some years ago as they shouted, "You will not replace us," occasionally transforming their chants into, "Jews will not replace us." Kathleen Blee, professor of sociology and dean at the University of Pittsburgh, said what propels white supremacy historically is threat, the idea that the white race is imperiled. And this sense of threat then justifies their acts of hatred and violence. Peter Simi, associate professor of sociology at Chapman University, said, for the far-right groups, violence is central to their way of looking at the world. The idea of having violent confrontation and conflicts fuels and energizes them. They feed off it. So when dealing with white supremacists in a public setting, which we have to do now and again, like a march or a pride or a parade or a protest, we have to keep that at the center of our attention, that they thrive on threat and violence and take advantage of it to harden their beliefs, to fundraise, and to recruit. Tina Rosenberg, in an opinion piece for the New York Times, wrote, "Here's what white supremacists want to do when they stage a rally. They want to legitimize their views. They want to strengthen their self-image as part of the downtrodden. They want to be seen as the vulnerable. They want to unite their squabbling factions. They want to attract new people to the movement. They want to control media coverage. and they want to feel powerful and heroic. She continues, they can accomplish all of those goals when people respond to violence by throwing fists or rocks. If you want to resist those who would stir up violence, she says, using humor is more effective than staying at home when they march, and far better than rewarding their provocations with a melee in the streets. Kaz Ahmud, associate professor at the University of Georgia, says, ridicule makes the far right look less attractive to the type of people they want to attract. There's a sizable portion who are there for the thrill. It doesn't mean they don't believe in the broader ideology, but they really enjoy the potential violence. They want to feel dangerous and important. They don't want to feel like part of a sketch. Tina Rosenberg continues, after all, which plan is more attractive to young macho men? We'll face a small number of masked tough guys, or we'll face a large number of men, women, and children wearing silly hats and big red noses. And that brings us to Bloomington. Since June of last year, it has become widely known that one of the vendors at our local farmers market, the owners of Schooner Creek Farm, belong to and recruit for a white nationalist hate group known as the American Identity Movement. American Identity Movement recently changed its name from Identity Europa. They were major organizers of the Charlottesville Unite the Right rallies, and they changed their name and reorganized because of the massive negative pushback following those rallies. And also because both their founder and their immediate past director have been sued for instigating violence there, and that lawsuit is still going on as we speak. In 2017, Eli Mosley, the past head of Identity Europa, said some of the most horrifying words I've ever heard. I just want to warn you that these words are filled with racist and anti-Semitic epithets, which I'll edit out, and racial and religious violence. There's an S word here that they use, which is a racist name for Hispanic people, and then there's a K word, which is an anti-Semitic word for Jewish people. And he also uses the N word in what he says here. He says, I work in HR, human resources, firing N words and S words all day. Before that, I was in the Army and I got to kill Muslims for fun. I'm not sure which one was better. Watching N words and S words cry because they can't feed their little mud children, or watching Muslims brain spray on the wall. Pretty horrible context. Honestly, both probably suck compared to listening to a K-word scream while in the oven. This is the expression of how horrifying this group is and how horrible their words and their violence are towards people of color, and others, religious minorities and others. So anyone who both is a member of and recruits for this group is of serious, serious concern. Their views are horrific. When awareness grew of this issue, the privately owned market in nearby Nashville, Indiana, banned Schooner Creek Farm almost immediately. But because the Bloomington market is run by the city, protections of its speech and assembly kicked in. Without direct, significant evidence of discrimination in the market, the city did not believe it could legally cancel their contract. Since then, many in our community have been protesting, encouraging a boycott, and advocating for policy change to support the safety and dignity of people of color, religious minorities, and other marginalized groups in our community. And honestly, it's been a mess. The protest started with online advocacy and flyering on the edge of the market to inform people, but threats from white supremacists began fairly quickly. Our local Antifa group walked into the market dressed in black bloc, covered in black from head to toe with masks, and stood in front of the farmers market, their stand, in an attempt to scare white supremacists from coming to the market. They came there because there were some online threats, and they came there as a response to those online threats, to try and let people know that this was not a place that they could come. Unfortunately, that choice backfired in some ways, and local right-wing militia showed up armed the next week to protect the white supremacist farmers. Online activity skyrocketed, with many viable threats coming in from white supremacists, both locally and throughout the country and the world. The mass shootings at the Gilroy Garlic Festival and in El Paso and Dayton, Ohio, all had just happened. And to prevent further harm, the mayor closed the market for 2 weeks and then reopened with increased police presence and active suppression of public protest. The market prohibited flyering and carrying signs in the market. Protesters were actively policed and pressured out of the market, and any and all protesting was greatly discouraged by the allies of the mayor's office. So some of us got together to figure out how to creatively protest without getting arrested. We created t-shirts that featured a Cornell West quote on the front. "Justice is what love looks like in public." And here's actually one of the t-shirts that we created. And it also read on the back, "Boycott Schooner Creek, defund white supremacy" on the back. And you can see there's a photo of us in the market. Some of us, that's me, along with Amrita Myers. And we chose purple because we really love the color. And also it was about the least threatening color imaginable that we could think of. We signed a covenant of nonviolence that restricted us from engaging Schooner Creek, their customers, or anyone else trying to start a fight. We had a strict nonviolent and non-engagement policy. And we walked in the market, including in front of the stand, which you see us right there, and also in this slide that's coming up. Now, it stirred this protest stirred a lot of unrest, both for the farm stand and for the market staff. They tried hard to get us to leave, and they threatened to call the police, but we left peacefully as we had planned at noon after several hours of protesting. Schooner Creek Farm tried to mock us and stir up a sense of martyrdom around what we were doing, and they labeled us the Purple Shirt Brigade, and we claimed the name proudly. We also found a theme song, "Start Wearing Purple" by Gogol Bordello, and we used social media to encourage the community to wear purple to the market as an act of protest and defiance. The next week, we pushed the envelope and we walked into the market with our t-shirts, but we also had tiny little purple signs. If you remember, signs have been banned inside the market. So we had these tiny purple little signs, and here's one here. And with nothing written on them, they were just a purple little sign. But when the market staff demanded we remove them, we started fanning ourselves, claiming that they were not signs at all, but they were fans. And there you go. You can see some of our very dangerous signs there. And here's another one. This is me talking to the police because they called the police on us because they didn't like that we were there. Over the next few weeks, things slowed down when Schooner Creek unexpectedly didn't show up a few times at the market. And the weather was awful a few times as well. We did have a great protest in the rain one Saturday, when we wore clear ponchos over our t-shirts and carried purple umbrellas. We also played "Start Wearing Purple" on a speaker and danced in the rain. And it was cold, but it was fun. On the first Saturday in November, just after Halloween, this was actually the rainy day was just before Halloween when we were planning to do this protest, but we had to move it to after Halloween because of the rain. We upped the game again, and we wore costumes and brought in some guitarists. We played a personalized rewrite of "Start Wearing Purple" and sang it out loud and protested as purple unicorns, a purple octopus, purple Wonder Woman, a purple wizard, and all other kinds of wild, unidentifiable purple galore. There's the musicians playing with some of us in the background. Following the market that day, Schooner Creek posted the photos, and their supporters call us all kinds of names like degenerate furries, lunatics out for an airing, that sissy unicorn, weird, nuts, and more. But you know what didn't happen? There were no counter rallies in the market. None. There were no militias, no white supremacists, no right-wing escalation of any kind. And the boycott was working with a significant sales drop for the farm. The next week we pushed it again. We came into the market wearing costumes and singing songs, but this time we intentionally chose to hold signs with the names that the supporters of Schooner Creek Farm had given us, the names that they had called us online. So that was one of them right there, giving the unicorn a bad name. And that's when we were arrested, 5 of us, for singing and carrying a sign in America. And that was one of the photos that went around the world when it got a lot of media attention. A unicorn, an octopus, a Viking, a wizard, and Wonder Woman herself, who was in a wheelchair, by the way, were scooped up by the law. The charges, we were trespassing and disorderly conduct, although technically we weren't charged at the time, and eventually the charges were dropped as the prosecutor didn't feel that there was just cause for the arrest. The arrests went viral online and made national news. They were featured in the Daily Beast, Newsweek, and the UU World. The market closed soon after for the winter and recently reopened in a very limited way due to COVID-19. Now, much remains up in the air as the white nationalists continue to sell there. Perhaps most promising, the boycott has been effective as the white nationalist farmers had between a 60% and 80% drop in their sales, which may eventually inspire them to, move on. Also, a new community-run woman and people of color-led farmers market formed called the People's Market. As we look to the future, much remains unresolved and uncertain. Yet, I think it's important to stick it out, to keep standing for people of color, for marginalized groups, to put that forward. Anti-racism work is never to be taken lightly. I do take some consolation from the words of Tina Rosenberg again in her New York Times piece. And it seems too basic to even say, she says, but the rule is violated again and again. Successful political activists are strategic. They ask what will reach and motivate or convince the people we need. Very often, the answer is make them laugh.
Good morning again, everyone. One thing that I think is good to do when we are discussing relatively harrowing events is to remember the connections that we share between us that strengthen us and that help us to bear up under difficult circumstances. In your chat box, you will see a link to this week's connection card, which provides you with an excellent and immediate means to reach out to members of All Souls and to find the community that you may be looking for. As we've consistently said over the last few weeks, one way that we can address systemic inequity is to provide items to people who may be under-resourced. That includes household items for Interfaith Hospitality Network families who are being housed in apartments during COVID. It also includes donation items for our No Questions Asked food pantry, which particularly needs diapers, wipes, trash bags, and cleaning products. Those can be dropped off at the church within in the Fountain Square neighborhood. Our Transforming Hearts discussion group helps us to have a deeper understanding and to be more loving and more welcoming to transgender members of our All Souls community and our larger community. We also are holding a Chalice Circle facilitator training on June 22nd, which is very good to know because it's a way that you yourself can take the community that you've received at All Souls and widen that circle to others. My last ask, and it's a specific ask, is that if you are the parent of a child in our faith formation programs, that you please follow the link to the survey about when we should be holding our summer Messy Church weekly sessions. If you would do that, I would be extremely grateful. Please take a moment to fill this out now. Thank you.
Every week, we share the plate offering with an organization that shares our values. This week, we are sharing the plate with Shalom Community Center. As Forrest has explained to us, Shalom is a shelter, resource center, and housing center for people experiencing extreme poverty in Bloomington, Indiana. Last year, Shalom provided almost 80,000 meals, more than 14,000 nights of shelter, and helped more than 700 people find their way back home. Our speaker, Forrest Gilmore, as he noted, has been their executive director since 2011. You can contribute to All Souls and this worthy cause right now or after this virtual service online at www.allsoulsindy.org and clicking on the donate button. You can also contribute directly to Shalom at www.shalomcommunitycenter, all one word, .org. Thank you for your generous support of this church and the Shalom Community Center.
Make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh? My dad said, be an actor, my son, but be a comical one. They'll be standing in lines for those old honky-tonk monkey shines. Or you could study Shakespeare and be quite elite, and you could charm the critics and have nothing to eat. Just slip on a banana peel, the world's at your feet. Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh. Make 'em laugh. Don't you know everyone wants to laugh? My grandpa said go out and tell 'em a joke, but give it plenty of hope. Make 'em roar, make 'em scream. Take a fall, but a wall split a seam. You start off by pretending you're a dancer with grace. You wiggle till they're giggling all over the place, and then you get a great big custard pie in the face. Make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh, make 'em laugh. Make 'em laugh, don't you? All the what? My dad. They'll be standing in lines for those
Please join us in singing our final hymn for the day. This is the song One More Step. The words are printed in front of this lovely picture of unicorn balloons.
Our benediction this morning is from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
Thank you, Reverend Gilmore, and everyone who participated in today's service. You'll notice here, All Souls family, that there are some announcements coming up, so I give you a second to read those. And then we'll have a little postlude time while you go forth and fill your coffee cups. Something to keep in mind right here is we do a kid-friendly breakout room. And as I'm creating those, if you would like to be in that room, please just type in the chat, kids, and I will make sure to put you in that room. We invite you to stick around for our coffee hour coming up here in a few minutes. And we hope you can join us for all the continued programming going on at All Souls throughout the summer. Thank you very much.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how